I finally got in to see this Stern. He wasn't an old man at all. He looked up from his desk, flicked his eyes over me once, and picked up a pencil. "Sit over there, Sonny." I stood where I was until he looked up again. Then I said, "Look, if a midget walks in here, what do you say? Sit over there, Shorty?" He put the pencil down again and stood up. He smiled. His smile was as quick and sharp as his eyes. "I was wrong," he said. "But how am I supposed to know you don't want to be called Sonny?" That was better, but I was still mad. "I'm 15 and I don't have to like it. Don't rub my nose in it." He smiled again and said, "Okay," and I went and sat down. "What's your name?" "Gerard. First or last?" "Both," I said. "Is that the truth?" I said, "No. And don't ask me where I live, either. What else is bothering you? How are you going to get paid?" I took out a $1,000 bill and laid it on the desk. "That's so you won't have to bill me. You keep track of it. Tell me when it's used up and I'll give you more. So you don't need my address." "Wait," I said, when he reached toward the money. "Let it lay there. I want to be sure you and I are going to get along." He folded his hands. "I don't do business this way, son. I mean, Gerard." "Jerry," I told him. "You do if you do business with me. You make things difficult, don't you? Where did you get $1,000? "I won a contest, 25 words or less about how much fun it is to do my dainty or under things with Sudzo." "All right," he said. I was surprised. I think he knew it, but he didn't say anything more, just waited for me to go ahead. "Before we start, if we start," I said, "I got to know something. The things I say to you, what comes out while you're working on me, is that just between us, like a priest or a lawyer?" "Absolutely," he said. "No matter what?" "No matter what." I watched him when he said it. I believed him. "Pick up your money," I said. "You're on." "How do we start?" "We started when you walked in here." So then I had to laugh. "Ha ha! All right, you got me. All I had was an opening. I didn't know where you'd go from there, so I couldn't be there ahead of you." "That's very interesting," Stern said. "Do you usually figure out everything in advance?" "Always." "How often are you right?" "All the time, except—" "You answer that, and I won't have to come back here." "You really don't know?" "I wish I did. Look, this isn't getting us anywhere, is it?" He shrugged. "Depends on where you want to go." He took out a blackened pipe. He smelled it, turned it over while looking at me. "No one knows what's really wrong with you but you. No one can find a cure for it but you. No one but you can identify it as a cure. And once you find it, no one but you can do anything about it." "What are you here for?" "To listen." "I don't have to pay somebody no day's wage every hour just to listen." "True, but you're convinced that I listen selectively." "Am I?" I wondered about it. "I guess I am." "Well, don't you?" "No, but you'll never believe that." "Ha ha ha." He asked me what that was for. I said, "You're not calling me Sonny." "Not you." He shook his head slowly. "What is it that you want to know about yourself that made you worried I might tell people?" "I want to find out why I killed somebody," I said right away. It didn't faze him a bit. "Lie down over there." I got up. "On that couch?" He nodded. "You can quit testing, Sonny. I'm good enough for your purposes." I clenched my jaw so hard my back teeth hurt. Then I relaxed. I relaxed all over. It was wonderful. "All right," I said. "I'm sorry." He didn't say anything, but I had that feeling again he was laughing. Not at me, though. "How old are you?" he asked me suddenly. 15. 15, he repeated. "What's the mean?" "Nothing. I'm 15. When I asked your age, you hesitated because some other number popped up. You discarded that and substituted 15. "The hell I did. I am 15. "I didn't say you weren't." His voice came patiently. "Now, what was the other number?" "I'm 15, I said defiantly. And then, "I don't like being only 15. You know that. I'm not trying to insist I'm 15. He just waited, still not saying anything. I felt defeated. The number was 8. "So you're 8. And your name?" "Jerry." I got up on one elbow, twisting my neck around so I could see him. He had his pipe apart and was sighting through the stem at the desk lamp. "Jerry, without no, "All right," he said mildly, making me feel real foolish. I leaned back and closed my eyes. 8, I thought, 8. "It's cold in here," I complained. 8, plate, state, hate. I ate from the plate of the state and I hate. I didn't like any of that and I snapped my eyes open. The ceiling was still gray. It was all right. Stern was somewhere behind me with his pipe, and he was all right. I took 2 deep breaths. 3, and then let my eyes close. 8. 8 years old. 8. Hate. Years. Fierce. Old. Cold. Damn it! I twisted and twitched on the couch, trying to find a way to keep the cold out. I ate from the plate of the... I grunted, and with my mind I took all the 8s and all the rhymes and everything they stood for and made it all black. But it wouldn't stay black. I had to put something there, so I made a great big luminous figure 8 and just let it hang there. But it turned on its side, and inside the loops it began to shimmer. It was like one of those movie shots through binoculars. I was going to have to look through, whether I liked it or not. Suddenly I quit fighting and let it wash over me. The binoculars came close, closer, and then I was there. 8. 8 years old, cold. Cold as a bitch in the ditch. The ditch was by a railroad. Last year's weeds were scratchy straw. The ground was red, and when it wasn't slippery, clinging mud, it was frozen hard like a flower pot. It was hard like that now, dusted with hoarfrost, cold as a winter light that pushed up over the hills. At night, the lights were warm, and they were all in other people's houses. I was dying in that ditch. Last night, it was as good a place as any to sleep, and this morning it was as good a place as any to die. Just as well. After a while, I rolled my eyes up and looked without moving. There was a big shoe there. There was an ankle in the shoe, and another shoe close by. I lay there waiting to get tromped. Not that I cared much anymore, but it was such a damn shame. All these months on my own, and they'd never caught up with me, never even come close, and now this. It was such a shame that I started to cry. I just kept my arms over my face and head and lay there with my eyes closed. For some reason, I stopped crying. I think people only cry when there's a chance of getting help from somewhere. When nothing happened, I opened my eyes and shifted my forearms a little so I could see up. There was a man standing over me, and he was a mile high. He had on faded dungarees and an old Eisenhower jacket with deep sweat stains under the arms. His face was shaggy, like the guys who can't grow what you call a beard but still don't shave. He said, "Get up." I looked down at his shoe, but he wasn't going to kick me. I pushed up a little and almost fell down again, except he put his big hand where my back would hit it. I lay against it for a second because I had to, and then got up to where I had one knee on the ground. I started to cuss at him, but he just turned his back and walked up the embankment toward the tracks. He put his chin on his shoulder and said, "Come on, will you?" He didn't chase me, so I didn't run. He didn't talk to me, so I didn't argue. He didn't hit me, so I didn't get mad. I went along after him. He waited for me. He put out his hand to me, and I spit at it. So he went on, up the tracks, out of my sight. I clawed my way up. The track was level just there, but as I turned my head to look along it, it seemed to be a hill that was steeper and steeper and turned over above me, and the next thing you know, I was lying flat on my back, looking up at the cold sky. The man came over and sat down on the rail near me. He didn't try to touch me. I gasped for breath a couple of times and suddenly felt I'd be all right if I could sleep for a minute, just a little minute. I closed my eyes. The man stuck his finger in my ribs. Hard. It hurt. "Don't sleep," he said. I looked at him. He said, "You're frozen stiff and weak with hunger. I want to take you home and get you warmed up and fed. But it's a long haul up that way, and you won't make it by yourself. If I carry you, will that be the same to you as if you walked it? What you going to do when you get me home?" "I told you." "All right," I said. He picked me up and carried me down the track. He put me down at last. We were there. There was inside a room. It was very warm. He put me on my feet, and I snapped out of it in a hurry. The first thing I looked for was the door. I saw it and jumped over there and put my back against the wall beside it in case I wanted to leave. Then I looked around. It was a big room. One wall was rough rock and the rest was logs with stuff shoved between them. There was a big fire going in the rock wall. Not in a fireplace exactly, it was a sort of hollow place. There was an old auto battery on a shelf opposite with 2 yellowing electric light bulbs dangling by wires from it. There was a table, some boxes, and a couple 3-legged stools. The air had a haze of smoke and such a wonderful, heartbreaking, candy and crackling smell of food, the little hose squirted inside my mouth. The man said, "What have I got here, baby?" And the room was full of kids. Well, 3 of them, but somehow there seemed to be more than 3 kids. There's a girl about my age, 8 I mean, with blue paint on the side of her face. She had an easel and a palette with lots of paints and a fistful of brushes, but she wasn't using the brushes. She was smearing the paint on with her hands. Then there was a little Negro girl about 5 with great big eyes who stood gaping at me. And in a wooden crate, set up on 2 sawhorses to make a kind of bassinet, was a baby, I guess about 3-4 months old. They did what babies do, drooling some, making some more bubbles, and kicking. When the man spoke, the girl at the easel looked at me and then at the baby. The baby just kicked and drooled. The girl said, "His name's Jerry. He's mad." "What's he mad at?" the man asked. He was looking at the baby. "Everything," said the girl. "Everything and everybody." "Where'd he come from?" I said, "Hey, what is this?" But nobody paid any attention. The man kept asking questions at the baby, and the girl kept answering. Craziest thing I ever saw. "He ran away from his state school," the girl said. "They fed him enough, but no one blessed with him." That's what she said. Blessed. I opened the door then, and the cold air hooted in. "You louse," I said to the man. "You're from the school." "Close the door, Janie," said the man. The girl at the easel didn't move, but the door banged shut behind me. I tried to open it, and it wouldn't move. I let out a howl, yanking at it. "I think you ought to stand in a corner," said the man. "Stand him in a corner, Janie." Janie looked at me. One of the three-legged stools sailed across to me. It hung in midair and turned on its side. It nudged me with its flat seat. I jumped back, and it came after me. I dodged to the side, and that was the corner. The stool came on. I tried to bat it down and just hurt my hand. I ducked, and it went lower than I did. I put one hand on it and tried to vault over it, but it just fell, and so did I. I got up again and stood in the corner, trembling. The stool turned right side up and sank to the floor in front of me. The man said, "Thank you, Janie." He turned to me. "Stand there and be quiet, you. I'll get to you later. You shouldn't have kicked up all that fuss." And then to the baby, he said, "He got anything we need?" And again, it was the little girl who answered. She said, "Sure, he's the one." "Well," said the man, "what do you know?" He came over. "Jerry, you can live here. I don't come from no school. I'll never turn you in." "Yeah, huh?" "He hates you," said Janie. "What am I supposed to do about that?" he wanted to know. Janie turned her head to look into the bassinet. "Feed him." The man nodded and began fiddling around the fire. Meanwhile, the little Negro girl had been standing in the one spot with her big eyes right out in her cheekbones looking at me. Janie went back to her painting, and the baby just lay there, same as always. So I stared right back at the little Negro girl. I snapped, "What the hell are you gawking at?" She grinned at me. "Jerry, ho-ho," she said, and disappeared. I mean, she really disappeared. Went out like a light, leaving her clothes where she'd been. Her little dress billowed in the air and fell in a heap where she had been, and that was that. She was gone. "Jerry, hee-hee," I heard. I looked up, and there she was, stark naked, wedged into space where a little outcropping in the rock wall stuck out just below the ceiling. The second I saw her, she disappeared again. "Jerry, ho-ho," she said. Now she was on top of the row of boxes they used as storage shelves, over on the other side of the room. "Jerry, hee-hee." Now she was under the table. "Jerry, ho-ho." This time she was right in the corner with me, crowding me. I yelped and tried to get out of the way and bumped the stool. I was afraid of it, so I shrank back again, and the little girl was gone. The man glanced over his shoulder from where he was working at the fire. "Cut it out, you kids," he said. There was a silence, and then the girl came slowly out from the bottom row of shelves. She walked across to her dress and put it on. "How did you do that?" I wanted to know. "Ho-ho," she said. Janie said, "It's easy. She's really twins." "Oh," I said. Then another girl, exactly the same, came from somewhere in the shadows and stood beside the first. They were identical. They stood side by side and stared at me. This time I let them stare. "That's Bonnie and Beanie," said the painter. "This is Baby, and that," she indicated a man, "that's Lone, and I'm Janie." "That's all?" said Stern. I lay on the couch and looked up at the gray ceiling. "Is that where you live, with those people?" I bit off a fingernail that had been bothering me. "Not for a long time. Not since Baby was 3. "Baby is 3, he repeated. "Oh," I said, "that." I closed my eyes. Something was going on all the time in Lone's house. Sometimes I slept in the daytime. I guess the only time everybody slept at once was when someone was sick, like the first time I arrived here. It was always sort of dark in the room, the same night and day, the fire going, the 2 old bulbs hanging yellow by their wires from the battery. When they got too dim, Janie fixed the battery, and they got bright again. Janie did everything that needed doing, whatever no one else felt like doing. Everybody else did things too. Lone was out a lot. Sometimes he used the twins to help him, but you never missed them because they'd be here and gone and back again, bing, like that. And Baby, he just stayed in his bassinet. I did things myself. I cut wood for the fire, and I put up more shelves, and then I'd go swimming with Janie and the twins sometimes. And I talked to Lone. I didn't do a thing that the others couldn't do, but they all did things that I couldn't do. I was mad all the time about that. But I wouldn't have known what to do with myself if I wasn't mad all the time about something or other. It didn't keep us from blushing. Blushing, that was Janie's word. She said Baby told it to her. She said it meant everyone all together being something, even if they all did different things. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 body, 1 head, all working together, although a head can't walk and arms can't think. Lone said maybe it was a mixture of blending and meshing, but I don't think he believed that himself. It was a lot more than that. Baby talked all the time. It was like a broadcasting station that runs 24 hours a day, and you can get what it's sending any time you tune in, but it'll keep sending whether you tune in or not. When I say he talked, I don't mean exactly that. He semaphored mostly. You'd think those wandering, vague movements of his hands and arms and legs and head were meaningless, but they weren't. It was semaphore, only instead of a symbol for a sound, or such like, the movements were whole thoughts. I mean, spread the left hand and shake the right high up, and thump with the left heel, and it means, anyone who thinks a starling is a pest just don't know anything about how a starling thinks, or something like that. Jenny said she made Baby invent the semaphore business. She said she used to be able to hear the twins thinking. That's what she said, hear them thinking, and they could hear Baby. So she would ask the twins whatever she wanted to know, and they'd ask Baby, and then tell her what he said. But then as they grew up, they began to lose the knack of it. Every young kid does. So Baby learned to understand when someone talked, and he'd answer with his semaphore stuff. Lone couldn't read the stuff, and neither could I. The twins didn't give a damn. Jenny used to watch him all the time. He always knew what you meant if you wanted to ask him something, and he'd tell Janie, and she'd say what it was. Part of it, anyway. Nobody could get it all, not even Janie. All I know is Janie would sit there and paint her pictures and watch Baby, and sometimes she'd bust out laughing. I went out with Lone to get some turpentine and a couple of picnic hams one time. We went through the woods to the railroad track and down a couple of miles to where we could see the glow of a town. Then the woods again, and some alleys, and a back street. Lone was like always, walking along, thinking. We came to a hardware store, and he went up and looked at the lock and came back to where I was waiting, shaking his head. Then we found a general store. Lone grunted, and we went and stood in the shadows by the door. I looked in. All of a sudden, Beanie was in there, naked like she always was when she traveled like that. She came and opened the door from the inside. We went in, and Lone closed it and locked it. "Get along home, Beanie," he said, "before you catch your death." She grinned at me and said, "Ho-ho," and disappeared. We found a pair of fine hams and a 2-gallon can of turpentine. I took a bright yellow ballpoint pen, and Lone cuffed me and made me put it back. "We only take what we need," he told me. After we left, Beanie came back and locked the door and went home again. I only went with Lone a few times when he had more to get than he could carry easily. I was there about 3 years. That's all I can remember about it. Lone was there or he was out, and you could hardly tell the difference. The twins were with each other most of the time. I got to like Jenny a lot, but we never talked much. Baby talked all the time, only I don't know what about. We were all busy, and we blushed. I sat up on the couch suddenly. Stern said, "What's the matter?" "Nothing's the matter. This isn't getting me any place." "You said that when you'd barely started. Do you think you've accomplished anything since then?" "Oh, yeah, but then how can you be sure you're right this time?" He waited as if to clear something up in his mind. Then he said, "There's something in that baby is 3 phrase that bounces you away. Why is that?" I looked up at the gray ceiling. Baby is 3. Baby is 3. I went up to a big house with a winding drive that ran under a sort of theater marquee thing. Baby is 3. Baby... "How old are you?" 33, I said. And the next thing you know, I was up off that couch like it was hot and heading for the door. Stern grabbed me. "Don't be foolish. You want me to waste the whole afternoon?" "What's that to me? I'm paying for it." "All right, it's up to you." I went back. "I don't like any part of this," I said. "Good. We're getting warm then." "What made me say 33? I ain't 33. I'm 15. And another thing." "Yes?" "It's about that baby is 3. It's me saying it, all right. But when I think about it, it's not my voice." "Like 33 is not your age?" "Yeah," I whispered. "Jerry," he said warmly, "there's nothing to be afraid of. I don't think a man could get a nastier shock than to find out he has someone else's memories. The ego is too important to let slide that way. But consider, all your thinking is done in code, and you have the key to only about 1/10 of it. So you run into a stretch of code which is abhorrent to you. Can't you see that the only way you'll find the key is to stop avoiding it?" "You mean I'd started to remember with somebody else's mind?" "It looked like that to you for a while, which means something. Let's try to find out what." "All right." I felt sick. I felt tired. And I suddenly realized that being sick and being tired was a way of trying to get out of it. "Baby is 3, he said. "Baby is maybe. Me, 3. 33. Me. You, Q, I yelled. Stern didn't say anything. "Look, I don't know why, but I think I know how to get to this, and this isn't the way. Do you mind if I try something else?" "You're the doctor," he said. Ha ha! I had to laugh. Then I closed my eyes. There, through the edges of the hedges, the ledges and wedges of windows were shouldering up to the sky. The lawns were sprayed-on green, neat and clean, and all the flowers looked as if they were afraid to let their petals break and be untidy. I walked up the drive in my shoes. I'd had to wear shoes and my feet couldn't breathe. I didn't want to go to the house, but I had to. I went up the steps between the big white columns and looked at the door. I wished I could see through it, but it was too white and thick. There was a window the shape of a fan over it, too high up, though, and a window on each side of it, but they were all crudted up with colored glass. I hit on the door with my hand and left dirt on it. Nothing happened, so I hit it again. It got snatched open, and a tall, thin colored woman stood there. "What do you want?" I said I had to see Miss Q. "Well, Miss Q don't want to see you like see you," she said. She talked too loud. "You got a dirty face." I started to get mad then. I was already pretty sore about having to come here, walking around near people in the daytime and all. I said, "My face ain't got nothing to do with it. Where's Miss Q? Go on, find her for me." She gasped. "You can't speak to me like that." I said, "I didn't want to speak to you like anyway. Let me in." I started wishing for Janie. Janie could have moved her, but I had to handle it by myself. I wasn't doing so hot either. She slammed the door before I could so much as curse at her. So I started kicking on the door. For that, shoes are great. After a while, she snatched the door open again so sudden I almost went on my can. She had a broom with her. She screamed at me. "You get away from here, you trash, or I'll call the police." She pushed me, and I fell. I got up off the porch floor and went for her. She stepped back and whooped me one with the broom as I went past, but anyway, I was inside now. The woman was making little shrieking noises and coming for me. I took the broom away from her, and then somebody said, "Miriam," in a voice like a grown goose. I froze, and the woman went into hysterics. "Oh, Miss Alicia, look out, he'll kill us all. Get the police, get a—" "Miriam," came the honk, and Miriam dried up. There at the top of the stairs was this prune-faced woman with a dress on and had lace on it. She looked a lot older than she was, maybe because she held her mouth so tight. I guess she was about 33. 33. She had mean eyes and a small nose. I asked, "Are you Miss Q?" "I am. What is the meaning of this invasion?" "I got to talk to you, Miss Q." "Don't say got to. Stand up straight and speak out." The maid said, "I'll get the police." Miss Q turned on her. "There's time enough for that, Miriam. Now, you dirty little boy. What do you want?" "I got to speak to you by yourself," I told her. "Don't you let him do it, Miss Alicia," cried the maid. "Be quiet, Miriam." "Little boy, I told you not to say got to. You may say whatever you have to say in front of Miriam." "Like hell." They both gasped. I said, "Lone told me not to." "Miss Alicia, you ain't going to let him—" "Be quiet, Miriam. Young man, you will keep a civil—" Then her eyes popped up real round. "Who did you say?" "Lone said so." "Lone." She stood there on the stairs looking at her hands. Then she said, "Miriam, that will be all." And you wouldn't know it was the same woman, the way she said it. The maid opened her mouth, but Miss Q stuck out a finger that might as well have had a rifle sight on the end of it. The maid beat it. "Hey," I said, "here's your broom." I was just going to throw it, but Miss Q got to me and took it out of my hand. "In there," she said. She made me go ahead of her into a room as big as our swimming hole. It had books all over it and leather on top of the tables with gold flowers drawn into the corners. She pointed to a chair. "Sit there. No, wait a moment." She went to the fireplace and got a newspaper out of a box and brought it over and unfolded it on the seat of the chair. "Now sit down." I sat on the paper, and she dragged up another chair, but didn't put no paper on it. "What is it? Where's Lone?" "He died," I said. She pulled in her breath and went white. She stared at me till her eyes started to water. "You sick?" I asked her. "Go ahead, throw up. It'll make you feel better." "Dead? Lone is dead?" "Yeah. There was a flash flood last week, and when he went out the next night in that big wind, he walked under an old oak tree that got gullied under by the flood. The tree come down on him." "Came down on him," she whispered. "Oh, no, it's not true." "It's true, all right. We planted him this morning. We couldn't keep him around no more. He was beginning to Stop!" She covered her face with her hands. "What's the matter?" "I'll be all right in a moment," she said in a low voice. She went and stood in front of the fireplace with her back to me. I took off one of my shoes while I was waiting for her to come back, but instead she talked from where she was. "Are you Lone's little boy?" "Yeah. He told me to come to you." "Oh, my dear child." She came running back, and I thought for a second she was going to pick me up or something, but she stopped short and wrinkled up her nose a little bit. "But what's your name?" "Jerry," I told her. "Well, Jerry, how would you like to live with me in this nice big house and have new clean clothes and everything?" "Well, that's the whole idea. Lone told me to come to you. He said you got more dough than you know what to do with, and he said you owed him a favor." "A favor?" That seemed to bother her. Well, I tried to tell her. He said he'd done something for you once, and you'd said someday you'd pay him back for it if you ever could. This is it. What did he tell you about that? She got her honk back by then. Not a damn thing. Please don't use that word, she said, with her eyes closed. Then she opened them and nodded her head. I promised, and I'll do it. You can live here from now on, if you want to. That's got nothing to do with it. Lone told me to. You'll be happy here, she said. She gave me an up and down. I'll see to that. Okay, shall I go get the other kids? Other kids? Children? Yeah, this ain't for just me. For all of us. The whole gang. Don't say ain't. She leaned back in her chair, took out a silly little handkerchief and dabbed her lips with it, looking at me the whole time. Now, tell me about these other children. Well, there's Janie, she's 11 like me, and Bonnie and Beanie are 8, they're twins, and Baby. Baby is 3. I screamed. Stern was kneeling beside the couch in a flash, holding his palms against my cheeks to hold my head still. I've been whipping it back and forth. Good boy, he said, you found it. You haven't found out what it is, but now you know where it is. Mind a suggestion? No. Just talk, he said. Don't try to get too far into what you're saying. Just talk again. All right. He waited, then said quietly, in the library. You told her about the other kids. I told her about, and then she said, and then something happened and I screamed. She comforted me and I cussed at her. But we're not thinking about that now. We're going on. Well, I went and got the other kids, and they didn't want to come. But Lone said we had to stay together, and we had to go to Miss Q, and that was that. But all hell broke loose when we got there. We must have been a sight. We were dirty, we probably smelled bad, and for sure we didn't know how to act. We weren't ready for a place like that or people like her and the maid Muriel, and they sure weren't ready for us. Funny, Lone dead, but there we were. There Miss Q was, locked and bound to promises made to a dead man. That was hell, I said to Stern. They had their work cut out. Yeah, I suppose they did. So did we. Look, we were going to do exactly what Lone said. Nothing on earth could have stopped us from doing it. We were tied and bound to doing every last little thing Miss Q said to do. But she and Miriam never seemed to understand that. I guess they felt they had to push every inch of the way. All they had to do was make us understand what they wanted, and we'd have done it. That's okay when it's something like telling me not to climb into bed with Janie. Miss Q raised holy hell over that. You'd have thought I'd robbed the crown jewels the way she acted. But when it's something like, you must behave like little ladies and gentlemen, it just doesn't mean a thing. And 2 out of 3 orders she gave us were like that. Aha, she'd say. Language, language. For the longest time, I didn't dig that at all. I finally asked her what the hell she meant, and then she came out with it. But you see what I mean. I certainly do, Stern said. Did it get easier as time went on? We only had real trouble twice. Once about the twins and once about Baby. That one was real bad. What happened? About the twins? Well, when we'd been there about a week or so, we began to notice that we almost never got to see Bonnie and Beanie. It was like that house was 2 houses, one part for Miss Q and Janie and me, and the other part for Miriam and the twins. I guess we'd have noticed it sooner if things hadn't been such a hassle at first, getting us into new clothes and making us sleep all the time at night, and all like that. But here's the thing. We'd all get turned out in the side yard to play, and then along comes lunch, and the twins got herded off to eat with Miriam while we ate with Miss Q. So Janie said, why don't the twins eat with us? Miriam's taking care of them, dear, Miss Q says. Janie looked at her with those eyes. I know that. Let 'em eat here, and I'll take care of 'em. Miss Q's mouth got all tight, and she said, they're little colored girls, Jane. Now eat your lunch. But that didn't explain anything to Janie or me either. I said, I want 'em to eat with us. Lone said we should stay together. But you are together, she says. We all live in the same house. We all eat the same food. Now, let us not discuss the matter. I looked at Janie, and she looked at me, and she said, so why can't we all do this living and eating right here? Miss Q put down her fork and looked hard. I have explained it to you, and I have said there will be no further discussion. Well, I thought that was real nowhere, so I just rocked back my head and bellowed, Bonnie, Beanie, and bing, there they were. So all hell broke loose. Miss Q ordered them out, and they wouldn't go. And Miriam came steaming in with their clothes, and she couldn't catch them, and Miss Q got to honking at them, and finally at me. She said this was too much. Well, maybe she'd had a hard week, but so had we. So Miss Q ordered us to leave. I went and got Baby and started out, and along came Janie and the twins. Miss Q waited till we were all out the door, and the next thing you know, she ran after us. She passed us and got in front of me and made me stop. So we all stopped. Is this how you follow Lone's wishes? She asked. I told her yes. She said she understood Lone wanted us to stay with her. And I said, yeah, but he wanted us to stay together more. She said, come back in and we'd have a talk. Janie asked Baby, and Baby said, okay, so we went back. Stern said. Now, go on and tell me about the other trouble you had. About Baby. Baby. Yeah. Well, that was a couple of months after we moved to Miss Q's. Things were already getting real smooth even then. We learned all that yes ma'am, no ma'am routines by then, and she got us catching up with the school, regular periods, morning and afternoon, 5 days a week. Jenny had long ago quit taking care of Baby, and the twins walked to wherever they went. That was funny. They could pop from one place to another right in front of Miss Q's eyes, and she wouldn't believe what she saw. She was too upset about them suddenly showing up bare. They quit doing it, and she was happy about it. She was happy about a lot of things. It had been years since she'd seen anybody. Years. She even had meters put outside the house so no one would ever have to come in. But with us there, she began to liven up. She quit wearing those old lady dresses and began to look halfway human. She ate with us sometimes even. But one fine day, I woke up feeling real weird. It was like somebody had stolen something from me when I was asleep, only I didn't know what. I crawled out of my window and along the ledge into Janie's room, which I wasn't supposed to do. She was in bed. I went and woke her up. I can still see her eyes, the way they opened a little slit, still asleep, and then popped open wide. I didn't have to tell her something was wrong. She knew, and she knew what it was. Baby's gone, she said. We didn't care then who woke up. We pounded out of her room and down the hall and into the little room at the end where Baby slept. You wouldn't believe it. The fancy crib he had and the white chest of drawers and all that mess of rattles and so on, they were gone. And there was just a writing desk there. I mean, it was as if Baby had never been there at all. We didn't say anything. We just spun around and busted into Miss Q's bedroom. I'd never been in there but once and Janie only a few times, but forbidden or not, this was different. Miss Q was in bed with her hair braided. She was wide awake before we could get across the room. She pushed herself back and up until she was sitting against the headboard. She gave the two of us the cold eye. What is the meaning of this? She wanted to know. Where's Baby? I yelled at her. Gerard, she said, there's no need to shout. Janie was a real quiet kid, but she said, you better tell us where he is, Miss Q. And it would have scared you to look at her when she said it. So all of a sudden, Miss Q took off the stone face and held her hands out to us. Children, she said, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. But I've just done what is best. I sent Baby away. He's gone to live with some children like him. We could never make him really happy here. You know that. That doesn't matter, Janie said. You had no call to send him away. And I said, yeah, you better bring him back, but quick. Then she started to jump salty. Among the many things I've taught you, I'm sure, is not to dictate to your elders. Now then, you run along and get dressed for breakfast, and we'll say no more about this. I told her, nice as I could, Miss Q, you're going to wish you brought him back right now, but you're going to bring him back soon, or else. So she got up out of her bed and ran us out of the room. I was quiet a while, and Stern asked, what happened? Oh, I said, she brought him back. I laughed suddenly. She got the treatment from the second she slammed her door on us. She had a big china pot under her bed, and it rose up in the air and smashed through her dresser mirror. Then one of the drawers in the dresser slid open, and a glove came out of it and smacked her face. She went to jump back on the bed, and a whole section of plaster fell off the ceiling onto the bed. The water turned on in her little bathroom, and the plug went in, and just about the time it began to overflow, all her clothes fell off their hooks. She went to run out of the room, but the door was stuck, and when she yanked on the handle, it opened real quick, and she spread out on the floor. The door slammed shut, and more plaster come down on her. Then we went back in and stood looking at her. She was crying. I hadn't known till then that she could. You going to get Baby back here? I asked her. She just lay there and cried. After a while, she looked up at us. It was real pathetic. We helped her up and got her to a chair. She just looked at us for a while and at the mirror and at the busted ceiling, and then she whispered, what happened? What happened? You took Baby away, I said. That's what. And she screamed at us, stop it! Stop it! Stop talking about that mongoloid idiot. It's no good to anyone, not even to itself. How could I ever make believe it's mine? I said, get rats, Janie. There was a scuttling sound in the baseboard. Miss Q covered her face with her hands and sank down on the chair. Not rats, she said. There are no rats here. Then something squeaked and she went all to pieces. Did you ever see anybody really go to pieces? Yes, Stern said. It took a couple of hours for her to get straightened out enough so she could use the phone. But we had Baby back before lunchtime. I laughed. What's funny? She never seemed to rightly remember what had happened to her. About 3 weeks later, I heard her talking to Miriam about it. She said it was the house settling suddenly. She said it was a good thing she'd sent Baby out for that medical checkup. The poor little thing might have been hurt. She really believed it, I think. She probably did. That's fairly common. We don't believe anything we don't want to believe. How much of this do you believe? I asked him suddenly. I told you before, it doesn't matter. I don't want to believe or disbelieve it. You haven't asked me how much of it I believe. I don't have to. You'll make up your own mind about that. Are you a good psychotherapist? I think so, he said. Who did you kill? The question caught me absolutely off guard. Miss Q, I said, Then I started to cuss and swear. I didn't mean to tell you that. Don't worry about it, he said. What did you do it for? That's what I come here to find out. You must have really hated her. I started to cry. 15 years old and crying like that. He gave me time to get it all out. The first part of it came out in noises, grunts, and squeaks that hurt my throat. Much more than you think came out when my nose started to run. And finally, words. Do you know where I came from? The earliest thing I can remember is a punch in the mouth. I can still see it coming, a fist as big as my head, because I was crying. I've been afraid to cry ever since. I was crying because I was hungry, cold maybe, both. After that, big dormitories, and whoever could steal the most got the most. Get the hell kicked out of you if you're bad, get a big reward if you're good, big reward, they let you alone. Try to live like that. Try to live so the biggest, most wonderful thing in the whole damn world is just to have them let you alone. So, a spell with Lone and the kids. Something wonderful, you belong. It never happened before. 2 yellow bulbs in a fireplace and they light up the world. It's all there is and it's all there ever has to be. Then the big change, clean clothes, cooked food, 5 hours a day school, Columbus and King Arthur, a 1925 book on civics that explains about septic tanks. Over it all, a big square-cut lump of ice, and you watch it melting in a corner's curve, and you know it's because of you, Miss Q. Hell, she had too much control over herself ever to slobber over us, but it was there, that feeling. Lone took care of us because it was part of the way he lived. Miss Q took care of us, and none of it was the way she lived. It was something she wanted to do. She had a weird idea of right and a wrong idea of wrong, but she stuck to them, trying to make her ideas do us good. When she couldn't understand, she figured it was her own failure, and there was an almighty lot she didn't understand and never could. What went right was our success. What went wrong was her mistake. That last year, that was, oh, good. So I killed her. Listen, I said. I felt I had to talk fast. I wasn't short of time, but I had to get rid of it. I'll tell you all I know about it. The one day before I killed her, I woke up in the morning, and the sheets crackly clean under me, the sunlight coming in through white curtains and bright red and blue drapes. There's a closet full of my clothes. Mine, you see. I never had anything that was really mine before. And downstairs, Miriam clinking around with breakfast and the twins laughing. Laughing with her, mind you, not just with each other, like they always did before. In the next room, Janie moving around, singing, and when I see her, I know her face will shine, inside and out. I get up. There's hot, hot water, and the toothpaste bites my tongue. The clothes fit me, and I go downstairs, and they're all there, and I'm glad to see them, and they're glad to see me, and we no sooner get set around the table when Miss Q comes down, and everyone calls out to her at once. And the morning goes by like that, school with a recess, there in the big, long living room. The twins with the ends of their tongues stuck out, drawing the alphabet instead of writing it. And then Janie, when it's time, painting a picture, a real picture of a cow with trees and a yellow fence that goes off in the distance. Here I am lost between the two parts of a quadratic equation, and Miss Q bending close to help me. And I smell the sachet she has on her clothes. I hold up my head to smell it better, and far away I hear the shuffle and clunk of filled pots going on the stove back in the kitchen. And the afternoon goes by like that. More school and some study and boiling out in the yard laughing. The twins chasing each other, running on their 2 feet to get where they want to go. Janie dappling the leaves in her picture, trying to get it just the way Miss Q says it ought to be. And Baby, he's got a big playpen. He don't move around much anymore. He just watches and dribbles some and gets packed full of food and kept as clean as a new sheet of tin foil. And supper. And the evening, and Miss Q reading to us, changing her voice every time someone else talks in the story, reading fast and whispery when it embarrasses her, but reading every word all the same. And I had to go and kill her. And that's all. You haven't said why, Stern said. What are you, stupid? I yelled. Stern didn't say anything. I turned on my belly on the couch and propped up my chin in my hands and looked at him. You never could tell what was going on with him, but I got the idea he was puzzled. I said why, I told him. Not to me. I suddenly understood that I was asking too much of him. I said slowly, we didn't blesh. Blesh? Oh, but you didn't after Lone died either. That was different. That was like a car running out of gas, but the car's there. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just waiting. But after Miss Q got done with us, the car was all taken to pieces, see? It was his turn to think a while. Finally he said, I can see the thing you're pointing at, that in order to preserve or rebuild that peculiar bond between you kids, you had to get rid of Miss Q. But I don't see the logic. I don't see that regaining that blessing was worth destroying this newfound security which you admit was enjoyable. I said desperately, maybe it wasn't worth destroying it. Stern leaned forward and pointed his pipe at me. It was, because it made you do what you did. After the fact, maybe things looked different. But when you were moved to do it, the important thing was to destroy Miss Q and regain this thing you'd had before. I don't see why, and neither do you. How are we going to find out? Well, let's get to the most unpleasant part if you're up to it. I lay down. I'm ready. All right. Tell me everything that happened just before you killed her. I began to hammer on the couch with my fist hard, once for each word. Why did I have to go and do that? Cut that out, he said. You'll hurt yourself. I ought to get hurt, I said. Ah, said Stern. I got up and went to the desk and got some water. What am I going to do? Tell me what you did after you killed her, right up to the time you came here. Not much, I said. It was only last night. I took her checkbook. I went back to my room, sort of numb. I put all my clothes on except my shoes. I carried them. I went out. Walked a long time, trying to think. Went to the bank when it opened. Cashed a check for $1,100. Got the idea of getting some help from a psychiatrist. Spent most of the day looking for one. Came here, that's all. Didn't you have any trouble cashing the check? I never have any trouble making people do what I want them to do. He gave a surprised grunt. I know what you're thinking. I couldn't make Miss Q do what I wanted. That's part of it, he admitted. If I had have done that, I told him, she wouldn't have been Miss Q anymore. Now, the banker, all I made him do was be a banker. I looked at him and suddenly realized why he fooled with a pipe all the time. It was so he could look down at it, and you wouldn't be able to see his eyes. You know the single thing that makes people kill? When I didn't answer, he said, survival. To save the self or something which identifies with the self. And in this case, that doesn't apply, because your setup with Miss Q had far more survival value for you singly and as a group than the other. So maybe I just didn't have a good enough reason to kill her. You had, because you did it. We just haven't located it yet. I mean, we have the reason, but we don't know why it was important enough. The answer is somewhere in you. Where? He got up and walked some. We have a pretty consecutive life story here. There's fantasy mixed up with a fact, of course, and there are areas in which we have no detailed information, but we have a beginning and a middle and an end. Now I can't say for sure, but the answer may be in that bridge you refused to cross a while back. Remember? I felt that sickness and faintness again, and again I pushed it away. Suddenly I wasn't going to be stopped anymore. Let's go get it. I lay down. He let me watch the ceiling and listen to silence for a while, and then he said, You're in the library. You've just met Miss Q. She's talking to you. You're telling her about the children. I lay very still. Nothing happened. Yes, it did. I got tense inside all over from the bones out, more and more. When it got as bad as it could, still nothing happened. I heard him get up and cross the room to the desk. He fumbled there for a while. Things clicked and hummed. Suddenly I heard my own voice. Well, there's Janie. She's 11 like me. And Bonnie and Beanie are 8. They're twins. And Baby. Baby is 3. And the sound of my own scream and nothingness. Sputtering out of the darkness, I came up flailing with my fists. Strong hands caught my wrists. They didn't check my arms. They just grabbed and rode. I opened my eyes. I was soaking wet. The thermos lay on its side on the rug. Stern was crouched beside me, holding my wrists. I quit struggling. What happened? He let me go and stood back. He threw me a hand towel and I used it. What hit me? I've had you on tape the whole time. He counted it before. It works wonders sometimes. It worked wonders this time, I growled. I think I blew a fuse. And you let yourself go unconscious rather than do it. What are you so pleased about? Last-ditch defense, he said tersely. We've got it now. Just one more try. Now hold on. The last-ditch defense is that I drop dead. You won't. You've contained this episode in your subconscious mind for a long time, and it hasn't hurt you. Hasn't it? Not in terms of killing you. How do you know it won't when we drag it out? You'll see. I looked up at him sideways. Somehow he struck me as knowing what he was doing. You know a lot more about yourself now than you did at the time, he explained softly. You can apply insight. You can evaluate it as it comes up. Maybe not completely, but enough to protect yourself. Don't worry. Trust me. I can stop it if it gets too bad. Now, just relax. Look at the ceiling. Be aware of your toes. Don't look at your toes. Look straight up. Your toes. Your big toes. Don't move your toes, but feel them. Count outward from your big toes. 1 count for each toe. 1, 2, 3. Feel that third toe. Feel the toe. Feel it. Feel it go limp. Go limp. Go limp. The next toe to it on both sides gets limp. So limp because your toes are limp. All of your toes are limp. What are you doing? I shouted at him. He said in the same silky voice, You trust me, and so do your toes trust me. They're all limp because you trust me. You're trying to hypnotize me. I'm not going to let you do that. You're going to hypnotize yourself. You do everything yourself. I just point the way. I point your toes to the path. Just point your toes. No one can make you go anywhere you don't want to go. But you want to go where your toes are pointed, where your toes are limp, where you're on and on and on. And where was the dangling gold ornament, the light in the eyes, the mystic passes? He wasn't even sitting where I could see him. Where was the talk about how sleepy I was supposed to be? Well, he knew I wasn't sleepy and didn't want to be sleepy. I just wanted to be toes. I just wanted to be limp, just a limp toe. No brains in a toe to go, 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 11 times, 11. I'm 11. I split in two, and it was all right. The part that watched the part that went back to the library, and Miss Q leaning toward me, but not too near, me with the newspaper crackling under me on the library chair, me with one shoe off and my limp toes dangling, and I felt a mild surprise at this. I was quite conscious, quite altogether there on the couch, with Stern droning away at me, quite able to roll over and sit up and talk to him and walk out if I wanted to, but I just didn't want to. There on the table, I'm able to see that the gold will unfold on the leather, and whether I'm able to stay by the table with you, with Miss Q, and Bonnie and Beanie are 8, they're twins, and Baby is 3. Baby is 3, she said. There was a pressure, a stretching apart, and a breakage, and with a tearing agony and a burst of triumph that drowned the pain, it was done. And this is what was inside, all in one flash, but all this. Baby is 3. My baby would be 3 if there were a baby, which there never was. Lone, I'm open to you. Open, is this open enough? His irises like wheels. I'm sure they spin, but I never catch them at it. The probe that passes invisibly from his brain through his eyes into mine. Does he know what it means to me? Does he care? He doesn't care, he doesn't know. He empties me and I fill as he directs me to. He drinks and waits and drinks again and never looks at the cup. When I saw him first, I was dancing in the wind, in the wood, in the wild, and I spun about, and he stood there in the leafy shadows watching me. I hated him for it. It was not my wood, not my gold-spangled, fern-tangled glen, but it was my dancing that he took, freezing it forever by being there. I hated him for it, hated the way he looked, the way he stood, ankle-deep in the kind, wet ferns, looking like a tree with roots for feet and clothes the color of earth. And as I stopped, he moved, and then he was just a man, a great ape-shouldered, dirty animal of a man, and all my hate was fear suddenly, and I was just as frozen. He knew what he had done, and he didn't care. Dancing, never to dance again, because never would I know the woods were free of eyes, free of tall, uncaring, dirty animal men. Summer days were the clothes choking me, winter nights were the precious decency round and about me like a shroud, and never to dance again, never to remember dancing without remembering the shock of knowing he had seen me. Oh, I hated him. How I hated him. To dance alone where no one knew, that was the single thing I hid myself when I was known as Miss Q, that Victorian, older than her years, later than her time, correct and starch, lace and linen and lonely. Now indeed I would be all they said, through and through, forever and ever, because he had robbed me of the one thing I dared to keep secret. He came out into the sun and walked to me, holding his great head a little on one side. I stood where I was, frozen inwardly and outwardly and altogether by the core of anger and the layer of fear. My arm was still out, my waist still bent from my dance, and when he stopped, I breathed again, because by then I had to. He said, "You read books?" I couldn't bear to have him near me, but I couldn't move. He put out his hard hand and touched my jaw, turned my head up until I had to look into his face. I cringed away from him, but my face would not leave his hand, though he was not holding it, just lifting it. "You got to read some books for me. I got no time to find them." I asked him, "Who are you?" "Lone," he said. "You going to read books for me?" "No, let me go, let me go." He wasn't holding me. "What books?" I cried. He thumped my face, not very hard. It made me look up a bit more. He dropped his hand away. His eyes, the irises, were going to spin. "Open up in there," he said. "Open way up and let me see." There were books in my head, and he was looking at the titles. He was not looking at the titles, for he couldn't read. He was looking at what I knew of the books. I suddenly felt terribly useless, because I had only a fraction of what he wanted. "What's that?" he barked. I knew what he meant. He'd gotten it from inside my head. I didn't know it was in there even, but he found it. "Telekinesis," I said. "How's it done?" "Nobody knows if it can be done. Moving physical objects with the mind." "It can be done," he said. "This one?" "Teleportation. That's the same thing. Well, almost. Moving your own body with mind power." Yeah, I see it," he said gruffly. "Molecular interpenetration, telepathy, and clairvoyance. I don't know anything about them. I think they're silly. Read about them. It don't matter if you understand or not. What's this?" It was there in my brain, on my lips. "Gestalt." "What's that?" "Group. Like a cure for a lot of diseases with one kind of treatment. Like a lot of thoughts expressed in one phrase. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts." "Read about that, too. Read a whole lot about that. That's the most you got to read about. That's important." He turned away, and when his eyes came away from mine, it was like something breaking, so that I staggered and fell to one knee. He went off into the woods without looking back. I got my things and ran home. There was anger, and it struck me like a storm. There was fear, and it struck me like a wind. I knew I would read the books. I knew I would come back. I knew I would never dance again. So I read the books, and I came back. Sometimes it was every day for 3 or 4 days, and sometimes, because I couldn't find a certain book, I might not come back for 10. He was always there in the little glen, waiting, standing in the shadows, and he took what he wanted of the books and nothing of me. He never mentioned the next meeting. If he came there every day to wait for me, or if he only came when I did, I have no way of knowing. He made me read books that contained nothing for me, books on evolution, on social and cultural organization, on mythology, and ever so much on symbiosis. What I had with him were not conversations. Sometimes nothing audible would pass between us but his grunt of surprise or small, short hum of interest. He tore the books out of me the way he would tear berries from a bush, all at once. He smelled of sweat and earth and the green juices his heavy body crushed when he moved through the wood. If he learned anything from the books, it made no difference in him. Then came a day when he sat by me and puzzled something out. He said, "What book has something like this?" Then he waited a long time, thinking. "You got a radio station. You got 4 or 5 receivers. Each receiver is fixed up to make something different happen. Like one digs and one flies and one makes noise. But each one takes orders from the one place. And each one has its own power and its own thing to do, but they are all apart. Now, is there life like that instead of radio? Where each organism is a part of the whole, but separated? I don't think so. Unless you mean social organizations like a team, or perhaps a gang of men working, all taking orders from the same boss." "No," he said immediately, "not like that. Like one single animal." He made a gesture with his cupped hand, which I understood. "You mean a Gestalt life form? It's fantastic. No book has about that, huh?" "None I ever heard of." "I got to know about that," he said heavily. "There is such a thing. I want to know if it ever happened before." I tried. For days I tried, but I couldn't find out what he wanted. I found a magazine which stated that the next important evolutionary step in man would be in a psychic rather than a physical direction, but it said nothing about a, shall I call it, a Gestalt organism? There was something about slime molds, but they seemed to be more a hive activity of amoeba rather than even a symbiosis. To my own unscientific, personally uninterested mind, there was nothing like what he wanted, except possibly a band marching together, everyone playing different instruments with different techniques and different notes, to make a single thing move along together. But he hadn't meant anything like that. So I went back to him in the cool of an early fall evening, and he took what little I had in my eyes and turned from me angrily with a gross word I shall not permit myself to remember. "You can't find it," he told me. "Don't come back." He got up and went to a tattered birch and leaned against it, looking out and down into the wind-tossed, crackling shadows. I think he had forgotten me already. I know he leaped like a frightened animal when I spoke to him from so near. He must have been completely immersed in whatever strange thoughts he was having, for I'm sure he didn't hear me coming. I said, "Lone, don't blame me for not finding it. I tried." He controlled his startlement and brought those eyes down to me. "Blame? Who's blaming anybody?" "I failed you," I told him, "and you're angry." He looked at me so long I became uncomfortable. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. I wouldn't let him turn away from me. He would have. He would have left me forever without another thought. He didn't care. It wasn't cruelty or thoughtlessness, as I have been taught to know those things. He was as uncaring as a cat is of the bursting of a tulip bud. I took him by the upper arms and shook him. It was like trying to shake the front of my house. "You can know," I screamed at him. "You know what I read. You must know what I think." He shook his head. "I'm a person, a woman," I raved at him. "You've used me, and you've given me nothing. You've made me break a lifetime of habits, reading until all hours, coming to you in the rain and on Sunday. You don't talk to me, you don't look at me, you don't know anything about me, and you don't care. You put some sort of a spell on me that I couldn't break. And when you're finished, you say, 'Don't come back.' Do I have to give something back because I took something?" "People do." He gave that short, interested hum. "What do you want me to give you? I ain't got nothing." I moved away from him. I don't know what I felt. After a time I said, "I don't know." He shrugged and turned. I fairly leaped at him, dragging him back. "I want you to—" "Well, damn it, what?" I couldn't look at him. I could hardly speak. "I don't know. There's something, but I don't know what it is. It's something that I couldn't say it if I knew it." When he began to shake his head, I took his arms again. "You've read the books out of me. Can't you read the me out of me?" "I never tried." He held my face up and stepped close. "Here," he said. His eyes projected their strange probe at me, and I screamed. "Oh," he said, "yeah, that." He moved like a flash. There was a pressure, a stretching apart, and a breakage. And with a tearing agony and a burst of triumph that drowned the pain, it was done. I came up out of it through 2 distinct levels. I am 11, breathless from shock from a transfer agony of that incredible entrance into the ego of another. And I am 15, lying on a couch where Stern drones on, quietly, quietly limp, your ankles and legs as limp as your toes, your belly goes soft, the back of your neck is as limp as your belly. It's quiet and easy and all gone soft and limper than limp. I sat up and swung my legs to the floor. Okay, I said. Stern looked a little annoyed. This is going to work, he said, but it can only work if you cooperate. Just lie. It did work, I said. He looked at me piercingly. What do you mean? It was right there, where you said, in the library, when I was 11, 3. It knocked loose something that had been boiling around in her for 3 years, and it all came blasting out. I got it full, like I never knew could be. Go on, said Stern. That's really all. I mean, that's not all. A whole lot of things that happened over about 4 months, every bit of it. She knew Lone. You mean a whole series of episodes? That's it. You got a series all at once, in a split second? That's right. Look, for that split second, I was her, don't you see? I was her. Everything she'd ever done, everything she'd ever thought and heard and felt. Everything, everything, all in the right order if I wanted to bring it out like that. Any part of it if I wanted it by itself. If I'm going to tell you about what I had for lunch, do I have to tell you everything else I've done since I was born? No, I tell you I was her, and then and forever after I can remember anything she could remember up to that point, in just that one flash. A gestalt, he murmured. Aha, I said, and thought about that. I thought about a whole lot of things. I put them aside a moment and said, why didn't I know all this before? You had a powerful block against recalling it. I got up excitedly. I don't see why. I don't see that at all. Just natural revulsion, he guessed. How about this? You had a distaste for assuming a female ego, even for a second. You told me yourself right at the beginning that I didn't have that kind of a problem. Well, how's this sound to you? You say you felt pain in that episode, so you wouldn't go back into it for fear of re-experiencing the pain. Let me think. Yeah, that's part of it. That thing of going into someone's mind. She opened up to me because I reminded her of Lone. I went in. I wasn't ready. I'd never done it before, except maybe a little against resistance. I went all the way in, and it was too much. It frightened me away from trying it for years. And there it lay, wrapped up, locked away. But as I grew older, the power to do that with my mind got stronger and stronger, and still I was afraid to use it. And the more I grew, the more I felt down deep that Miss Q had to be killed before she killed what I am. My God, I shouted, do you know what I am? No, he said. Like to tell me about it? I'd like to, I said. Oh, yes, I'd like that. He had that professional, open-minded expression on his face, not believing or disbelieving, just taking it all in. I had to tell him, and suddenly I realized that I didn't have enough words. I knew the things, but not the names for them. Lone took the meanings and threw the words away. Further back, you read books for me. The look of his eyes, that opening up thing. I went over to Stern. He looked up at me. I bent close. First he was startled, then he controlled it, then he came even closer to me. My God, he murmured, I didn't look at those eyes before. I could have sworn those irises spun like wheels. Stern read books. He'd read more books than I had ever imagined had been written. I slipped in there, looking for what I wanted. It was easier for me to do than it had been for Lone. Straightening up, I got away from Stern. He looked sick and frightened. It's all right, I said. What did you do to me? I needed some words. Come on, get professional. I had to admire him. He put his pipe in his pocket and gouged the tips of his fingers hard against his forehead and cheeks. Then he sat up, and he was okay again. I know, I said. That's how Miss Q felt when Lone did it to her. What are you? I'll tell you. I'm the central ganglion of a complex organism which is composed of Baby, a computer, Bonnie and Beanie, teleports, Janie, telekineticist, and myself, telepath and central control. There isn't a single thing about any of us that hasn't been documented. The teleportation of the yogi, the telekinetics of some gamblers, the idiot savant mathematicians, and most of all, the so-called poltergeist, the moving about of household goods through the instrumentation of a young girl. Only in this case, every one of my parts delivers at peak performance. We ran into the problem of what it was I valued more than the security Miss Q gave us. Can't you see now what it was? My Gestalt organism was at the point of death from that security. I figured she had to be killed, or I would be. Oh, the parts would live on. 2 little colored girls with a speech impediment, 1 introspective girl with an artistic bent, 1 mongoloid idiot, and me, 90% short-circuited potentials and 10% juvenile delinquent. I laughed. Sure, she had to be killed. It was self-preservation for the Gestalt. Stern bobbled around with his mouth and finally got out, You don't need to, I laughed. This is wonderful. You're good, real good. And what now? What do you mean? Stern leaned back against the corner of his desk. Did it occur to you that maybe this Gestalt organism of yours is already dead? It isn't. How do you know? How does your head know your arm works? He touched his face. So? Now what? I shrugged. Did the Peking man look at Homo sap walking erect and say, now what? We'll live, that's all, like a man, like a tree, like anything else that lives. We'll feed and grow and experiment and breed. We'll defend ourselves. I spread my hands. We'll just do what comes naturally. But what can you do? What can an electric motor do? It depends on where we apply ourselves. Stern was very pale. Just what do you want to do? I thought about that. He waited until I was quite finished thinking and didn't say anything. Know what? I said at last. Ever since I was born, people have been kicking me around, right up until Miss Q took over. And what happened with her? She damn near killed me. I thought some more and said, everybody's had fun but me. The kind of fun everybody has is kicking someone around, someone small who can't fight back. Or they do you favors until they own you or kill you. I looked at him and grinned. I'm just going to have fun, that's all. He turned his back. I think he was going to pace the floor, but right away he turned again. I knew then he would keep an eye on me. He said, you've come a long way since you walked in here. I nodded. You're a good head shrinker. Thanks, he said bitterly. And you figure you're all cured now, all adjusted and ready to roll. Well, sure. Don't you? He shook his head. You said a while back that you'd been mad at everybody all your life. That's the way you lived. Have you ever wondered why? Can't say I have. One reason is that you were so alone. That's why being with the other kids, and then with Miss Q, came to mean so much. So, I still got the kids. He shook his head slowly. You and the kids are a single creature. Unique. Unprecedented. He pointed the pipe stem at me. Alone. The blood started to pound in my ears. Shut up, I said. Just think about it, he said softly. You can do practically anything. You can have practically anything. And none of it will keep you from being alone. Shut up, shut up. Everybody's alone. He nodded. But some people learn how to live with it. How? He said after a time, because of something you don't know anything about. It wouldn't mean anything to you if I told you. Tell me and see. He gave me the strangest look. It's sometimes called morality. I guess you're right. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled myself together. I didn't have to listen to this. You're afraid, I said. You're afraid of Homo Gestalt. He made a wonderful effort and smiled. That's bastard terminology. We're a bastard breed, I said. I pointed. Sit down over there. He crossed the quiet room and sat at the desk. I leaned close to him and he went to sleep with his eyes open. I straightened up and looked around the room. Then I got the thermos flask and filled it and put it on the desk. I fixed the corner of the rug and put a clean towel at the head of the couch. I went to the side of the desk and opened it and looked at the tape recorder. Like reaching out a hand, I got Beanie. She stood by the desk, wide-eyed. Look here, I told her. Look good now. What I want to do is erase all this tape. Go ask Baby how. She blinked at me and sort of shook herself and then leaned over the recorder. She was there and gone and back, just like that. She pushed past me and turned two knobs, moved a pointer till it clicked twice. The tape raced backward past the head, swiftly, whining. All right, I said. Beat it. She vanished. I got my jacket and went to the door. Stern was still sitting at the desk, staring. A good head shrinker, I murmured. I felt fine. Outside I waited, then turned and went back in again. Stern looked up at me. Sit over there, Sonny. Gee, I said. Sorry, sir. I got in the wrong office. That's all right, he said. I went out and closed the door. All the way down to the police station, I grinned. They'd take my report on Miss Q and like it. And sometimes I laughed, thinking about this Stern, how he'd figure the loss of an afternoon and the gain of $1,000. Much funnier than thinking about him being dead. What the hell is morality, anyhow?